Okay. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. Guess what? It's my advent calendar. As you can see, it is December 1-2. So I have to find the 2nd of December, open it up, and get a treat. Here it is. Right here. I wish they would put it in an order so you're not going around looking like a fool. Alright, yesterday I saved the can. American Wheat Ale. So, wow. I burped already. American Indian Pale Ale. India. Wow. Yesterday was 5% alcohol. Today is 6. Get some of that cardboard off of there. Sorry. It started foaming up on me. Not as fan of a pale ale. Well, I don't mind them. I just don't drink them that often. So it's more of an acquired taste. Makes me want to get my beer game up. Well, we're going to go ahead and finish this How Did Russia Become an Empire series out video.
This idea was abandoned after a few days as the task was time-consuming and the ships were severely damaged. Vatrang was unaware that the Russian plan had failed and sent a detachment of 10 ships under Rear Admiral Ehrenhold to the north of the peninsula. The rest of the Swedish fleet sailed towards the Russian force. Unfortunately for Vatrang, the weather calmed down on the 26th, and his wind-dependent ships of the line could not move further than Hanko. Peter realized what kind of an opportunity had just presented itself, and he sent a vanguard of several ships to bypass Vatrang's fleet and engage Ehrenhold. Fearing that the rest of the Russian galleys would catch his ships in the shallow coastal waters, Vatrang sailed south, allowing the opposing forces to pass without any resistance. Ehrenhold, also unable to move, was caught by the large Russian fleet. Apraxin initially tried to convince him to surrender without a fight. Ehrenhold refused, telling the envoys, "The king did not give me command of these ships so that I would surrender them without a fight. The Tsar can expect nothing from me and my subordinates other than strong resistance." The Swedish fleet consisted of 1 pram, 6 galleys and 2 skerryboats. The ships were arrayed in a semi-crescent in between 2 islands, with the pram in the center and 3 galleys on each side, while the skerryboats were placed behind the line and did not engage in the battle. Apraxin had 98 ships under him, mostly galleys and half-galleys. Only around a quarter of that number would actually engage in the battle. 11 ships in the center, 6 on each flank, and 4 small ones would later attack from behind. The battle started on the morning of the 27th with massive artillery barrages from both sides. The artillery duel was in no way decisive, with ships on both sides sustaining only minimal damage. The Swedish ships carried superior artillery compared to their Russian counterparts. Due to their numbers, the Russians would have won even during a prolonged artillery battle, though with far heavier casualties. With the smoke from the artillery providing cover, the Russian fleet advanced simultaneously towards the Swedish line. This had 2 effects. The Swedish boats would not be able to concentrate their fire as effectively, and the Russian ships would decisively outnumber the Swedish ones. All 11 ships in the Russian center were ordered to advance towards the Swedish pram, called Elephant. Not only was that ship of the line the biggest threat to the Russian fleet, but Peter also wanted to capture it for his own collection. As the Russian ships were approaching, the Russian soldiers and sailors fired at the Swedes with their rifles. The Swedes, who were already heavily outnumbered, could not even mount a proper defense due to relentless incoming fire. The Russian troops began boarding the Swedish ships, and fierce close-quarters combat ensued. The Swedes fought bravely. However, it was only a matter of time until Russian numbers overwhelmed them. To Arinhold's surprise, 4 Russian gunboats went through a narrow passage between the island on their left and the mainland. Those gunboats subsequently attacked the Swedish galleys on the left and captured or sank all of them. The Swedish galleys on the right fell one by one as well, with only the Elephant still resisting. After a fire broke out on the Elephant, Arinhold was captured and the ship was taken over by the Russians.
They were able to get it.
In the end, the Swedish lost all of their ships and men, while the Russian casualties amounted to several hundred men. Though the battle had...
I'm sorry. I've watched a couple people jump off board, but I want you to watch this guy. He comes out, he hits the water, and then it's like he just pauses, and then he falls in. I apologize. Just watch. This guy right here.
Little to no effect on the Swedish
really?
Navy.
Yeah, there you go. You saw that,
were substantially foreboding. The Russians would now be able to launch devastating raids into Sweden, and the numerically inferior Swedish Navy could do little to nothing about it. Indeed, the Åland archipelago was captured later that year, and Umeå was sacked. Vatrang retreated with his fleet to Sweden. However, his failing health prevented him from taking any initiative in the following years. The Swedish defeat caused a sense of panic in Stockholm, and the nobility felt that now it would only be a matter of time before the Russians struck at the capital. Having no other alternative, the Swedish Council of State sent a letter to Charles, informing him that they would start negotiations towards an achievable peace with the coalition unless he returned as quickly as possible. With the Sultan's appetite for war diminished, Charles made an obvious choice. Charles was now determined to reach his homeland, and he rode through Europe at a tremendous speed. He reached Stralsund in November, only 2 weeks after leaving Istanbul. In the following month...
I'm sorry. Sorry. I was trying to read that thing on the side, and it went away just as I was reading something about Swedish meatballs.
Swedish Council of State sent a letter to Charles, informing him that they would start negotiations towards an achievable peace with the coalition unless he returned as quickly as possible. With the Sultan's appetite for war diminished, Charles made an obvious choice. Charles was now determined to reach his homeland, and he rode through Europe.
During his exile in the Ottoman Empire, Charles was very fond of Turkish food. Sure, he got used to it. Therefore, well, maybe he liked it, period. Therefore, on his return to Sweden, he brought the recipes of many Turkish dishes. The famous Swedish meatballs originated from one of these recipes. Now that's cool. That is cool. Cool. That's pretty cool. Sorry, just Swedish meatballs I've heard of. I don't think I've ever tried one. I've had meatballs. I don't know if there's a difference, but I've never had Swedish meatballs. But the fact that Swedish meatballs is just, I'm sorry. It's very cool to me. Apologies.
Europe at a tremendous speed. He reached Stralsund in November, only 2 weeks after leaving Istanbul. In the following months, Charles started looking for new allies against the coalition. Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia was willing to join the war on Sweden's side in exchange for having Stettin recognized as his own. This did not go well with Charles's no-inch-lost doctrine, so he refused. Prussia would enter the war against Sweden in 1715, the same year as Hanover did. In November 1715, a combined Danish-Saxon-Prussian army landed on the island of Rügen. Charles's attempt to stop their advance failed, and he was forced to return to Stralsund. The king's presence may have encouraged his men to continue their stalwart defense, yet the fall of the city was inevitable. With Stralsund surrounded on all sides, Charles left for Sweden on the 22nd of December, merely 2 days before the city fell. 15 years and 3 months after his departure, Charles was finally on the soil of his homeland. This left Sweden with only Wismar on the continent. However, the city fell in 1716 too. Bremen-Verden was partially occupied by Denmark and partially by Hanover. However, George I gained all of it after paying a substantial sum to the Danish king. In 1716, the Allied powers gathered their fleets in Copenhagen and planned a massive assault on the Swedish mainland, with Peter as its commander. Frederick IV of Denmark grew suspicious of Peter's Baltic ambitions, however, refusing to partake in any future actions. Frustrated at this lack of trust between allies, Peter called off the invasion. The loss of Sweden's last holdings on the continent gave both the people and the nobility hope that the war would finally end. Nevertheless, Charles was still determined to continue fighting. More war meant more men and more money, yet Sweden was devastated. Half the farmland was not cultivated because there were no labourers. Fisheries were abandoned. Foreign trade was ruined by the blockade of the Allied fleets. The fact that Charles was able to continue the war in spite of all this seems like nothing short of a miracle. This was only possible due to the appearance of Juri Heinrich von Goetsch as Charles's advisor. His administrative skill allowed Charles to raise another army, though his brutal methods only caused further dissent within the kingdom. Goetsch also used the distrust among the allies to strengthen Sweden's diplomatic position. By playing George I and Peter against each other, Charles received several relatively favourable separate peace offers. This would have allowed Charles to focus on recovering his Pomeranian possessions. Goetsch continuously tried to convince Charles to accept peace with Russia, in what can only be described as a Sisyphean task. To his credit, he did manage to wear down the stubborn king to accept the loss of Karelia and Ingria.
Did Charles just really hate Russia? Is that why he just wanted to keep fighting? Guessing?
Charles invaded Norway in 1716 in order to knock Denmark out of the war. However, the campaign was slow and costly. Finally, it would all be for naught, as on the 30th of November 1718, Charles was shot in the head and killed while besieging Frederikshamn. Whether it was a bullet from the Norwegian defenders or from one of his own men is still a matter of intense debate, as both are distinct possibilities.
Was he hated by his men, or were his men just done with war? I'm going to assume they were just done, and he wanted to keep going, especially because he was locked up at the Ottoman Empire for I don't know how long. I shouldn't say so long, but locked up, that he probably just took it as an insult that Russia had turned the tables and was able to start not necessarily winning, but winning more than they were losing. And when they did win, it was decisive. They weren't throwing men at him anymore as they had learned, get out of here. They had learned from the past, learn how to fight better. As he said in the beginning, that was the goal, was we're not going to win battles, but we can keep fighting and learn how to win.
The beleaguered Swedish army then returned to Sweden with their king's body. While crossing the Scandinavian mountains, thousands would die due to cold and starvation. The last hope of reviving the Swedish Empire died along with Charles. As Charles neither married nor sired any offspring, he was succeeded by his sister Ulrika Eleonora. She decided to renounce her absolute powers, and a period of parliamentary rule in Sweden would ensue. With his protector now dead, Goetsch was also imprisoned and executed. Ulrika Eleonora would abdicate in 1720 in favour of her husband, Frederick of Hesse, who held virtually no power. In late 1719 and early 1720, Sweden signed the Treaties of Stockholm with Hanover and Prussia. Sweden ceded Bremen-Verden to Hanover and Stettin to Prussia. In the summer of 1720, Sweden and Denmark signed the Treaty of Frederiksborg, according to which Sweden would regain Wismar and Stralsund, while also losing their exemption from the Sound toll and paying war reparations.
Danes have been levying a toll on ships traveling through the Sound. However, when the Treaty of Copenhagen 1660, Swedes had an exemption that lasted until the Treaty of Frederiksborg in 1720.
To Denmark. Denmark would also gain part of Holstein-Gottorp. Saxony, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and Sweden did not sign any peace treaty. Instead, they renewed the Treaty of Oliva from 1660. The last few years of the war were fairly quiet. Russian raids around Stockholm and Umeå are the only few exceptions. Though they did not have a profound effect on the war, they made the Swedish Riksdag increase their efforts at achieving peace. The final peace treaty was made at Nystad on the 10th of September 1721. Russia would gain Livonia, Estonia, Ingria, parts of Karelia and Viborg, while Finland would be returned to Sweden, together with 2 million thalers in war reparations. Sweden was now reduced to merely a regional power, would be gripped by the conflict between the monarchy and the parliament, and revanchism against Russia would dominate its foreign affairs. Poland-Lithuania would lose all semblance of central authority. The once powerful Commonwealth would become a battleground for Europe's empires in the next century. Denmark would enter a period of stability, while Prussia, similarly to Russia, would continue its growth on the European stage. The power vacuum left by Sweden would be filled by the ever-growing Russian Empire, which would dominate European affairs in the coming centuries. The Great Northern War completely changed the balance of power in Europe. Not only that, but it also marks a turning point in European history. Wars would have a European rather than a regional nature, as an increasing number of countries would become involved in each other's affairs and conflicts. We'll talk about the region's history more in the coming months, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it.
That was a really good series. I wish I had seen it more, and not as spread out as I did. But I was told to focus less on many different series and just focus on a couple, put those out, and that I prefer to do that. But people ask me for a lot of different requests, so I end up doing a bunch of things, and it slows everything down in terms of like this. But it is what it is. I'm trying to keep everyone happy. Got a little bit here. Let's go ahead and kill this. Okay. No, don't you fall. You're going to fall anyways, aren't you? Because you're just a piece of shit. Okay. I'm just cussing out an empty beer can. Oh my gosh. Am I dying? So, it's December 2nd. It's Friday. Can't have any more beer today because my calendar says I can't. So I'm going to end this video here. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the Russia. How did Russia become an empire? Like and subscribe, or you're going to find yourself woke up in the middle of the night and you're going to be eating your own underwear. There's going to be shit stains in it too.